their syncopations, ba, 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 ba. He just looked at me and said, 1, 2, 3. Karajan, of course, was fantastic with sound, but actually the most essential thing that he gave to the Berlin Philharmonic, I believe, was this unbelievable rhythmic. You can only have good rubato if you have good rhythm. If you don't have good rhythm, then everything is rubato. All music should be thought of as chamber music. And Daniel Barenboim once said, when he plays the piano, his left hand is playing chamber music with his right hand. ภิnkas Zukerman is a few years older than me, right? Maybe 7 or 8 years older than me. And he talks about Galamian, explaining and forcing him to do this and that. And I played about 2,000 concerts as a violinist, and some of the greatest repertoire imaginable, that we don't have to play with a metronome to be together, but we have to find a path that we follow together. For example, the Khachaturian piano concerto is a piece that is not played so often, right? Violin concerto much more. The piano concerto, fantastic. Really great piece. I've actually recorded it and I've performed it many times. So I don't know if that hasn't been played. That would be a nice thing to do here with a great Armenian pianist. Even though we grew up in England as English people in a way, my father and my grandmother spoke, of course they spoke Armenian and they spoke Turkish. They're from Istanbul, but they also spoke French. From schooling in Istanbul. So we all had to learn French to communicate with my grandmother. Which is kind of funny, isn't it? That the reason I spoke French when I was very young is because I was Armenian. We as Armenians understand very much what it is to be part of a race that has suffered. Even sometimes we feel guilty as this generation that we did not suffer. We as musicians, maybe almost anybody listening to this, cannot really understand why we have to have wars, because you would think we can have conversations instead. Yeah, I don't eat a lot before the concert, but I always eat something, because you should never be hungry to me when you're performing. Being hungry is a bad thing. Iman balde. You know what that is?
Yes, of course.
And 𝗪𝗪𝗔𝗡. Oh my God, that's a great question. Whereas hockey is like, so exciting. Death.
You are leading the Armenian National Philharmonic during its landmark 100th season. What does it mean to you to be part of such a storied legacy in the history of Armenian classical music?
Well, I'm very honored to be here during this very important season. Obviously, I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of that and to be doing this really serious, beautiful repertoire with a wonderful orchestra.
You are sharing the stage with the ANPO for the 4th time. How has musical chemistry been with the musicians?
Oh, it's wonderful. You know, I mean, conductors have the responsibility to try to bring everything together and to make everybody express themselves in one voice. And that is a very exciting process. But it's also very demanding, because in the Prokofiev Romeo Juliet especially, there's constant tempo changes and character changes, because it's telling a story, a very important story, in fact. So it takes a lot of detail work to bring everybody right together. But they do beautiful things. They're very sensitive musicians, virtuoso musicians, and so for me there's no limit. You know, I can ask for anything.
You had a world-class career as a violinist with the Tokyo String Quartet. How does your violinist soul influence the way you conduct a work like Shostakovich's Violin Concerto No. 1?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, everything that we do as musicians from the youngest age informs everything we do at the next stage in life. So at this stage in life, I've been performing for over 50 years, and so I don't even know any longer really what it is that makes me feel a certain way about music, because it's just been so long. But obviously the fact that I played about 2,000 concerts as a violinist, and some of the greatest repertoire imaginable, I mean, I feel very lucky to have done that, because it taught me a lot about everything, about the subtlety of expression, about how to deal with tempos and tempo character, about also what a tempo feels like in a concert hall, as opposed to what a tempo feels like in a room. It's quite a different thing. So, but as I said at the beginning, it's difficult to judge any longer because you have with you all your life's baggage, as it were, good and bad, and you just try to do your very best at every moment. You use your knowledge and your instincts to try to get the music to be as beautiful as possible.
This program features two Soviet giants. How do you balance Shostakovich's dark, nocturnal energy with the sweeping drama of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet?
I mean, that's what makes it such a beautiful experience, because of course Shostakovich was written right after the war, and we all know that Shostakovich's wartime experience was incredibly painful and extremely difficult, and he's still brooding very much in that mood, especially in the first movement. And even the fast playing is very satirical. It's very cynical, right? I mean, it's very dramatic and exciting as well, but there's something, the English word is insidious. We have to look that up. I don't know how to say that in Armenian at all, but there's this always really a certain kind of darkness and intensity, even when the music is going extremely fast. But also there's actually a defiance, a pride, you know, a strength, an internal strength, which everybody who suffered during that war, especially the siege of Leningrad, all these experiences, it must have been terrible. Now we as Armenians understand very much what it is to be part of a race that has suffered. Even sometimes we feel guilty as this generation that we did not suffer. You know, my father was born in 1916 in Istanbul. He left before he knew what was going on, understood what was going on. But he also fought for the British Army in the Second World War. So I'm a generation that hasn't had to experience these kinds of things. Now I live in America, where a lot of people have experienced terrible things with Vietnam and of course Iraq and so on. So we're surrounded by this darkness because humans, for some reason, are addicted to war. We as musicians, maybe almost anybody listening to this, cannot really understand why we have to have wars, because you would think we can have conversations instead. It shouldn't be. We have resources, but the music sometimes reflects every aspect of the human experience. And of course, then you go to the theatre, the Romeo and Juliet. This is another series of horrible misunderstandings. In a way, that is also a war, right? And the tragedy that comes out of that is extremely profound. And Prokofiev writes it in such a way that it's very, very moving emotionally, but also, of course, very beautiful, because he's talking about a wonderful, naive romance. And every aspect and every character is explained by the music in this piece. And it's almost 1 hour in length. It tells the entire story from beginning to end.
𝗺𝗂𝗧𝗘𝗥 𝗢𝗰 describes your musical connection as speaking the same way, and that's because you were a chamber musician. How do you bring that chamber intimacy to a massive symphonic scale?
It's a very interesting subject, and you know, the greatest music is played by an orchestra that thinks that they're playing chamber music all the time. In some ways, I think it's true that all music should be thought of as chamber music. And Daniel Barenboim once said when he plays the piano, his left hand is playing chamber music with his right hand, and his right hand is playing chamber music with his right, even when he's playing the piano. So there's this feeling of understanding exactly what's going on around you and complementing with whatever sound or whatever timing you're playing, complementing what the other people are doing all the time. So it's a constant back and forth. This allows also for a certain flexibility, which is so important in music, that we don't have to play with a metronome to be together, but we have to find a path that we follow together, you know. And it amuses me a little bit, because maybe on a Sunday, a lot of families will go out for a walk, or friends will go out for a walk. They never have to decide how fast they walk. Okay, they just go for a walk. Sometimes they move a little faster, and sometimes they stop to look at something, and then they move on a little bit further, and they never have a discussion. Okay, shall we go a little faster now? You know what I mean? It's very instinctive, and we have our musical path to follow as well. It's very individual in some ways. You know, we may all feel slightly differently about it, which is why Itzhak Perlman says that he and I feel music in a very similar way. It's very easy to make music with somebody who feels this flexibility in a similar way. But if you get with somebody who feels in a very different way, then you can rehearse for 2 weeks and it'll still be difficult.
Is there a specific work by an Armenian composer that you particularly love, or one that you still hope to conduct?
Well, there's a lot of Armenian music that I should conduct. You know, I mean, when you think about how much music there is by Khomidas and Babajanyan and of course Khachaturian, I'm living in the Western world where occasionally I bring something to them and they go, oh, wow. But generally speaking, we don't do a lot of Armenian music. Here, of course, you perform Armenian music more. So, I mean, there's a lot of great music written by Armenians. But it's very difficult in the world in general. There still people are addicted to the core repertoire. They want to hear Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and Tchaikovsky and some composers of the 20th century and a few of the 21st century. And as a conductor, we have to find ways to program unusual pieces, but still bring in an audience, right? It's our obligation, is all I would say, as performers, to always try to introduce music that people do not know. And so I'm hoping that over the next several years that I can still introduce more Armenian music to the audiences in America. I think we have to explore the different repertoire and find out. Probably should not be Khachaturian, because we've all done a lot of Khachaturian. Of course, it's great. For example, the Khachaturian piano concerto is not played so often, right? Violin concerto much more. The piano concerto, fantastic. A really great piece. I've actually recorded it and I've performed it many times. So I don't know, if that hasn't been played, that would be a nice thing to do here with a great Armenian pianist.
You studied at Juilliard with Galamian, who had such great musicians as students as Perlman, Zukerman, Khachaturian sisters. What was his teaching secret?
You know, sometimes teaching is a little bit like magic. You can't necessarily quite tell why it's so successful, because Galamian did not say very much, actually, especially by the time I went to him. So Pinchas Zukerman is a few years older than me, right? Maybe 7 or 8 years older than me, and he talks about Galamian, explaining and forcing him to do this and that. When I got to Galamian, he was already more quiet, and he just would look at you with a certain thing, and he would also conduct. He would conduct phrases very beautifully, so you could really feel the music coming through him. And then sometimes he would say, no, you have to make sure, and then angle of the arm and the angle of the thing with the string crossing. He would see every little detail. So I think that Galamian was a great teacher because he taught us all to listen. The most important thing you can do as a teacher is to help the student teach themselves, right? Because they have 1 hour lesson and then they go and practice for 32 hours or something, and then they have 1 more hour lesson. So what they're doing in those 32 hours is much more important than what they do in that 1 hour, because it's 32 hours, right? Or whatever it happens to be. We practice a lot, right? So when you're teaching, you have to make sure that you're helping them know how to practice. And I think that's what Galamian was extremely good at.
After Karajan famously ordered you to conduct Brahms during a masterclass, what was the one piece of his advice that stuck with you most?
I mean, he didn't really say too much to me, other than that he said I have conductor's hands. But there was one moment in the Brahms First Symphony slow movement where there are syncopations, and the oboe has a beautiful line. And you have to be very clear in that place. And I was not being clear enough. And he just looked at me and said, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And I can still hear the voice. And it was so like, I could feel his rhythmic presence. And Karajan, of course, was fantastic with sound. But actually, the most essential thing that he gave to the Berlin Philharmonic, I believe, was this unbelievable rhythmic, both discipline and freedom, therefore, because they could play, they had, you can only have good rubato if you have good rhythm. If you don't have good rhythm, then everything is rubato. Right? So I remember that so well, and I thought, you know, even when he's conducting like this, there's a pulse. He can feel everywhere exactly where the pulse is. And an orchestra can sense that from a podium. Like if the conductor is really, like every beat is inevitable, and then when something spacious happens, then they notice it.
What is your philosophy on the balance between talking to explain a concept and showing it through gestures during a rehearsal?
Yeah, basically, I like to talk as little as possible, and I kind of have a rule that I never talk for more than about 30 or 40 seconds, and then we play again. Unless I think the orchestra is tired and is losing concentration, then I'll stop and I'll think of a story. Something, doesn't matter what it is, just to give everybody a break. Hopefully it's a little bit funny. Everybody relaxes a little bit and then back. Basically, we as conductors should be able to show everything with our hands. Otherwise, we're not really conductors.
You were born in Toronto to an Armenian father and an English mother, and raised in the UK. Growing up in a multicultural household, how did your Armenian identity manifest itself?
You'd have to ask somebody else probably, because I don't know really. But I mean, when you have the name Oundjian, everybody, especially growing up in England in the 60s, like everybody was Smith, Murray, you know, Johnson. Everybody was basically, you know, British. So having the name Oundjian, and my brother was a figure skater, as people know it, and he competed in the 68 and 72 Olympics for Great Britain with the name Oundjian, which was very odd to them, because he should have been a Soviet at that time. He should have been representing the Soviet Union, right? Or couldn't represent Armenia then. But so that was very interesting. For us, it was always very interesting. We were the foreigners, even though we grew up in England as English people in a way, but we always were aware we were foreigners. And I think that for me, you know, my father had a great friend called 𝗵𝗫, who was the most beautiful violinist. The uncle of 𝗵𝗫𝗀𝗀 is also a wonderful violinist, right? And we would have a lot of social occasions with Armenian families in London. Because it was important, of course, to my father and my grandmother. The unfortunate thing in a way is that my father and my grandmother spoke, of course they spoke Armenian and they spoke Turkish. They were from Istanbul, but they also spoke French from schooling in Istanbul. So we all had to learn French to communicate with my grandmother, but not Armenian. Which is kind of funny, isn't it? That the reason I spoke French when I was very young is because I was Armenian. This is sort of strange thing. But how else did it manifest itself? I don't know. You know, you can't really experience it from outside when you were yourself. I had always had lots of friends. I was always an avid sports player. So I had a great social life, and I always loved music, and I enjoyed studying all the things I had to study. And people didn't necessarily treat me any differently, I don't think, because I was Armenian. But as you said, it was multicultural. And we also, because my father was also in business, in the carpet business, of course. So we had a lot of friends also from Persia or Iran now, and even Chinese friends would come, and people from Afghanistan. So, you know, we met people from a lot of different cultures, and I think that was very, very lucky.
Every visit to Armenia is unique. What did you feel the moment you landed in Yerevan this time?
It's kind of interesting because every time you come, it feels more and more like a modern city, right? I mean, the airport is getting really nice, so easy to get off from the airport. Everything works so well. I mean, I came here in 1996, right? 96 and 97 to conduct the Armenian Philharmonic. So this is my fourth time, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, then, I don't have to remind you what it was like then. It's a completely different world now. And, you know, every time there's just more and more beautiful shops, and people look like life is, I hope it's true, that life is improving for certainly the Armenians in Yerevan. You know, this tragedy that happened now almost 3 years ago is incredibly saddening. It's just awful, because this is a part of the world that we shouldn't even have to talk about. And the fact that it's sort of gone now, and it seems just that it's accepted that it's gone, even for somebody who never lived here, it's painful to imagine that. And I hope that, so I'm sure there's a lot of pain still for all the people who came in from Artsakh to live in this part of Armenia now, closer to Yerevan. I hope they're settling well, I hope they're being treated well, and that they're managing to recover, because there are many, many generations. Suddenly you're removed from your home. And this is a kind of tragedy that I don't think most of us cannot imagine really what that's like.
With your cousin, being the legendary Eric Idle of Monty Python, do you see a specifically Armenian sense of humor in your family?
Well, I think my cousin is an extremely funny person, and he always has been. Even before Monty Python, he would make us laugh like till we couldn't control ourselves. He was just extremely quick. He's very, very intelligent person and has a very broad knowledge. He went to Cambridge University. The problem is that other people in my family want to be like him, but they're not. So there's a lot of very bad humor in my family because they try a little bit too hard to be funny. He's the funny one, we should leave it to him.
Is there a specific Armenian dish or childhood memory of the Armenian table that stays with you?
Iman balde. You know what that is?
Yes, of course.
And 𝗪𝗪📏. That's my two favorites.
Do you have a pre-concert meal ritual, or do you save the Armenian feast for the post-concert celebration?
Yeah, I don't eat a lot before the concert, but I always eat something, because you should never be hungry. To me, when you're performing, being hungry is a bad thing. I had an experience actually once with Andrei Previn was a good close friend of mine, and we used to play piano quintets together. And one evening we were playing in big concert hall in New York at the New York Philharmonic, Schumann piano quintet. And in the last movement he just kept getting lost. He kept playing my part, and then he did it instead of the piano part, and then he would forget to play his part. And then we walked off the stage and he said, "I can't believe it. I have not eaten anything all day. I forgot to eat." And I never forgot that, because he was a genius. I mean, brilliant pianist, brilliant conductor, very funny guy too. But I never forgot that, because if you're hungry, you can start to lose stability a little bit up here. So I have something quite bland usually to eat, and a banana or two. I always have bananas, because the potassium is very centering and good energy for conducting. And then afterwards, I try not to eat too much.
Mozart or Mahler?
Oh my God. Impossible. Death. It's like asking me which one of my children I'm going to throw off a cliff.
The most Armenian quality of the AnPO sound?
The most Armenian quality? I think warmth, expressivity, yeah.
Morning rehearsals or evening performances?
Oh, evening performance.
Violin or podium? Where do you feel more at home?
Since my hand doesn't work anymore, definitely podium.
Favorite Armenian composer?
That's not fair, right? Everyone's going to say Khachaturian, because it's the one who's made Armenian music famous. But I have to say, I have a real soft spot for 𝗵𝗑𝗪.
If you could play a duet with any musician from history, who would it be?
Oh my God, that's a great question. David Oistrakh.
Best advice from Perlman in 3 words?
Enjoy yourself. Make practical decisions. Like when you have the concert, if you need more bow, use more bow. Don't make yourself suffer in concert. And always keep thinking new ideas.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Lavash or Garter?
Lavash.
What's your must-visit spot in Yerevan?
The Cascade, the steps, definitely, yeah.
Hockey or football?
Well, I mean, I was a soccer player, but my nephew played in the NHL for many years. And nowadays, I have to say I'd rather watch. Unless it's a great game of football, then it's great. But football can be so boring, because now it's all about keeping possession. Whereas hockey is like, so exciting.
One thing you always pack in your carry-on besides your baton?
Well, I have my pencil case, which has in it some important things, because it has my father's World War II badge. So he was a sergeant in the army, so I keep that with me always. I don't know why, but my sister gave it to me before I conducted the Benjamin Britten War Requiem about 20 years ago, and I never took it out of my pencil case. Thank you so much. Now, did you turn it on? You can turn it on now. You good?